Hello, welcome to this Unity tutorial where we're going to make a button, and so that we could walk up to the button in 3D space in Unity. So I've got an example scene here which I've used in my other devlog videos. Don't mind these snakes. If maybe you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know what's going on with these snakes. Anyway, we'll just leave those to fly around. So we've got a little world, and let's imagine that you wanted a button physically in this world that you could walk up to, kind of highlight, so when you got close to it, it would kind of signal that you're looking at it or something, and then maybe a mouse click would switch it on. At the moment, when I mouse click, I get these red waypoints appearing. That's just to do with these snakes, which is another story. Something else is going on there. Right, so in the middle of my example scene, I've got this egg thing, and if I press G, then it produces lots of these snakes, other snakes. Off they go, snaking around. So what would be lovely, and actually I'm just gonna, if I make a red dot up here, the snakes will go over there and leave us alone. There we go. They'll go get attracted to that waypoint. Anyway, what would be nice is, instead of pressing G, which the user might not know about, what if we had a button over here that we could go and read, and then click the mouse button, and then it would do the same behavior. It would trigger the same thing. So let's stop the simulation at the moment and go and do that. Firstly, in my project, let's make a new folder, so I'm keeping things kind of organized, and I'll call this button_tutorial, so I can find it, or you can find it later if I put this on GitHub. Let me know if I haven't and you want me to link you to the code. I don't know if the code will work. I'm just going to make it up. I've called this a tutorial, which usually means I'm supposed to make it, rehearse it, know what I'm doing, and then play. But here I'm just going to make it up as I go along. Right, okay. So here's our scene. We've got the first person controller, which is called Snake Wizard, don't ask. Terrain brain. This grows our terrain. The egg is going to be important. That's the thing that produced all the snakes, and we want to attach a button script to that. So let's just create a capsule. I don't usually make capsules. But there we go. We've got a capsule, and it's next to the egg. And so we want to attach a script to this so that it acts like a button, I guess. Maybe we could put a sphere on the top of him, something like that, or on the side, maybe like that, and then maybe bring down the scale a little bit, 0.3 by 0.3. Where are we? 0.3. Oh yeah, so it's like a little button now. Okay, that kind of sticks out of the capsule. That looks kind of cool. Okay. We'll leave him that colour, and what was I going to say? So we've got him. So essentially what we want to happen is, when we look at our button, then it changes colour. So we could do that via what the player's actually looking at. That would be really handy for VR, and I've done that before when I've made some VR things. Using line of sight, and for that we would use some ray tracing, or physics ray. Probably the easiest thing would be to make a collider. What do you call them? A trigger. Collider is a trigger around our sphere. Let's do that. So on our sphere, let's just call this what we call it, snake button. Make snake Sankey, make snake button. There we go. And our capsule, let's call this the control panel. And we really want to make that snake button a child of the control panel, which I'm struggling to do. There we go. So it hasn't changed where the snake button is, the make snake button is, but now that it's a child, I can grab hold of the capsule and move it around, and the button will stay in the same relative position, which is handy. And I think we can even rotate it around. Brilliant, and our button stays in the same orientation relative to the control panel. Brilliant. So we've got our control panel, we've got our snake button. So what we want is a collider, really. So let's get hold of our snake button and the collider. So the collider, I don't know if you can see this as well as I can, but when I click it on, there's like these little green I don't know what you call them, like lines, construction lines kind of appear. Okay, and that's what we're working with. We can edit the collider, which we want to do. So we want to say, basically, if our player comes into this area, we want to trigger a behavior. So all I've done is made sure that this sphere collider is a trigger, and I've gone to edit the collider, and I've just played around with its like control handle bits. There we go, and I've made it about this big. So if we get anywhere near that, we should be able to trigger a control. Okay, so talking of triggering controls, make sure we're in button tutorial. So now we'll make our first script. So I'm going to choose C# script, and we'll call this make snake BC for button control. I don't know. Make snake button control. Okay, now before I start, I'm going to make sure this is attached, not to the control panel, but to the button itself. Okay. In terms of thinking about object-oriented programming, we might want just one script on the control panel, and then it talks to loads of different buttons. For now, we're just dealing with one button. I'm going to attach the script to the button. Later on in the project, if you're going to continue this on, maybe you might want to rethink about where you want to put that script. Okay, it's going to be on the button. So let's open it up. So we need one important function. I've forgotten what it's called. It's going to be something like OnTriggerEnter. I think that's it. And what we want to do is just change the color of the button. That's what we'll aim for first of all, to test that this is working. So I think it's void on trigger, because we've made the collider a trigger, and I think it's called OnTriggerEnter. And it might take an argument, so it won't recognize it. I don't think C# or Unity will recognize. Have I made this large enough? Sorry. There we go. It might not recognize the function if we haven't got the exact number of parameters because of the overloading. OnTriggerEnter, and I think it takes a collider. So basically, collider, I'm going to call it a name, what hit me. Have I spelled collider wrong? No. What's going on here? Does it need to be a capital C? Yes, it does. Okay, so basically, I may have this wrong in a moment, but basically, the OnTriggerEnter function will take one argument, I think, and that will be a collider, which is useful information because different triggers will work for different objects. Maybe you want a button that maybe the snakes can't access. That would be interesting. Our snakes could go and use these buttons. That would be some really interesting AI behavior. Anyway, so if you pass in the collider that hit you, then this function can use that to decide what to do depending on who hit it. So we won't bother with checking, but we'll just say this dot. So this dot will refer to the game object that this script is attached to, and that happens to be the button itself. So this, and let's get component, and we're going to get hold of the mesh renderer because we want to try and change the color of the button. Get component mesh renderer. We want the material. I'm just going to go onto a new line because my font's so big now. Color equals, and now we could make it go red. So we could say equals new color, And now in here, it's like a vector 3, like X, Y, and Z. We now put in a red component, green component, and blue component. Up to 1, I think 0, so they're floats, 0 being not much of that colour pigment, and 1 being the highest possible. So we want it to go, I'll make it go green for kind of, I'm ready to be pressed. So no red, 100% green, and no blue. Okay, so the script is attached, the script is ready. Let's go and see if it works, if this function name is right. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to look it up. I'm going to have to debug. Take a little drink, Okay, it's running. There's no major like syntax or typing errors. We've landed in our scene. There's our control panel. Snakes are happy. Okay, there's a control panel. So if we get near it... Oh! It worked! I just made an embarrassing noise. It worked first time. That was my it worked first time noise without any practice. Look at that. Okay, so it worked. We came within the collider's area, which is a trigger. Because we made it a trigger, that's really important, we could use the OnTriggerEnter function. Okay, so it can detect us. So the next step is, if it's switched on, then when the user presses the left mouse key, we want to go and talk to another script on the egg to release all the snakes. That is a very strange sentence. So we also, now in this script, we want to know whether the button is on or off. So if the next thing we need to do, what we need to do now is, if we walk away from the button, we want it to go back to white. So actually, let's rewrite the start function. We'll just make sure that the color of the button is white. So that will be 100% red, 100% green, 100% blue. So it'll be white when it first starts. So button is white at start. If we get near to the button, then button turns green. And also we want to say button is ready. So we'll say ready equals true. So this variable doesn't exist yet, and it's going to be a boolean, so a true or false. So let's put that up here. We'll make it a public boolean, sorry, just bool, I need to write, boolean ready. And you can set the default up here, so we'll say false, you're not ready yet. So I've made it public just because that means that variable will appear in the inspector, in the editor. So there we go. Let's just close the collider now, and a transform we don't need to see. So here's our make snake button control script, which we were just editing. And now because I made that ready variable public, you can see it here in the inspector's control panel. So that's sometimes useful, because maybe you want some of the buttons to be ready and they can be triggered, you know, depending on your simulation or your game. So we can play with that. Right. Now, when the player enters the trigger zone, then we want to say the button is ready. Okay, so hopefully, hopefully there's another function called OnTriggerExit. So when the trigger, or when that collider area recognizes something has left its area, so it is inside and then it's left, there'll be another triggering, or another call to this function. There'll be another event call to this function. Again, I think it takes a collider as an argument, so you can see which object is left. So we'll turn the button white. You know what, I'll copy this we turn the button white, and then we say button no longer active or ready. Ready equals false. There we go. Let's just see if that works now. If it does, being a bit premature, then we can write if I click the left mouse button, go and call the function on the egg script itself, which at the moment, if I press G, that happens. Okay, so that's what we want to happen. Right, so now what we're testing is if I walk up to the button, okay, it's white at the moment. If I get close to it, it turns green. If I walk away, brilliant, it goes back to white, which wasn't happening before. So now we've got kind of a little device that's kind of interactive within our Unity scene that it's kind of like working with the player, giving the player information. Right, I think aesthetically we just want to lift up the capsule a little bit. The capsule, here he is, out of the ground. And right, what if we click? So this will be looking for clicks. This will be looking for clicks itself, this script. And so it needs an update function in order to kind of be present with what's going on in the scene, because the update function loops around and around and around, keep checking for things. So we just write void update, takes no arguments, and give it its body. There we go. We want to say if input, capital I, dot mouse button, or get mouse button, we'll say get mouse button up, because that means the user has pressed the mouse button and released. If we went for the other option, maybe get mouse button, that means if that mouse button is down, then do the action. It depends on what you're doing with your button. Maybe you wanted to, I don't know, drop loads of balls or something like this, and maybe just holding onto the button would be convenient. We'll go for get button up, and then you choose which button on the mouse. So you may have 3 or 4 buttons. So 0 means the first mouse button, because as a programmer you'll start counting from 0. Right. Okay, right. So if mouse button equals 0, then go and do this. So we want to first check if the button is ready. Okay, is the player actually standing next to it? Is that button green? So if ready, then we need a function like activate. I like that. There we go. Activate the button. Okay, so we'll write our activate here. So void activate. Right, so now we need to go and grab another script. Where is the other script? The other script is on our egg object. Here he is. I'm still looking around the capsule. There's the egg. Right. So it's called spawn. So we want a function. We want to be able to trigger a function, call a function on that script. How do you do that? I will show you now. So first we'll load up the script. So this is the spawn script, and we'll go on a little hunt for the correct function. Okay, right. Load pool, no, that won't be it. Void spawn, here we go. So this one is instantiating lots of game objects. That's not actually the one I want. We want the pool spawn. Okay, so we want to be able to call this function. Now, we won't be able to do it at the moment because it's not a public function. A function needs to be public if other scripts attached to different objects in your scene are going to communicate with it. So at the moment, I'm going to leave it like that, try and get it to work. It won't work, and then we'll make this public, and then hopefully it will work. That's the plan. And then the video is done. Right. Where is our button script? I can't make snake mark. Where's our button script gone? It's disappeared. I think I've accidentally closed it down at some point. Right. Go back into touch button. And save that script. Okay, activate. Have I written that right? Activate. Right. So we need to grab the script first of all from this code. So at the start, to set up, we'll say my button script, or no, we'll call it activation script. Activation script. And the easiest way we could go and grab that script actually is to make that a public function and populate it ourselves. So we could say public, it wants to be a script, it wants to be a specific script. So it needs to be spawn. Do I write CS? I don't think so, no. Public spawn activation script. Okay, there we go. So spawn is now a class because we've written this what do you call it? Like mono behavior public class. So we can actually type for it in another script. Again, I've lost my. Where did my button script go? Have I got two mono developers on the go? I don't know, maybe. Oh, sorry, it's called Make Snake. That's why, I just forgot the name of it. Apologies. Okay. Okay, so all we're dealing, let's just close down all of these other codes, all these other scripts. Right, so we've got make snake BC, which is our button, and spawn script. So we're trying to grab hold of this spawn script from make snake. So now that we've got our activation script variable and we've made it public, back in our scene, we should be able to get hold of the button, and there should now be, yes, this unpopulated, I never know what to call these, like variable space. What? I'll just make up a name now. A variable space. I'll call it variable space. Right. So we want to populate that with a function, with a script. Sorry. So we want no, we don't want to grab a script. We want to grab, because the script exists inside my assets folder. So it's not actually a part of the scene. And that script might have different variables in that the object, like this egg object, has like instantiated or set up. So actually we need to get hold of the egg so that we get hold of its spawn script. Okay, so easy enough. So instead of public spawn, we're going to say public game object and we'll call it activation script. Or no, better than that, we'll just call it activation object, so we don't get confused later on and think that this is a script when it's an object. Okay, and then in start, we want to get hold of that script. So, oh no, we don't need to do that in start. We could do that later on. We could do that in activate. So we want to say activation object, get component, and now we want to get hold of the spawn. Now, do I write CS there? I think I do. No, it's not looking good. Spawn. And this is actually how you call the function. We just write this function name here, which I think was it pull spawn? Yes, underscore pull spawn. So here we could just write, let's just go to a new line so everything stays in view, underscore pull spawn. There we go. And yes, so I've written it correctly, but it's not recognizing it. And that's because it's not public here. So find the function that you want to activate, make sure it's public, make sure you've saved that script. And then if we go back onto make snake, like magic, the red angry error highlighting has gone away. There we go. If you want to let people know that you're angry, use a highlighter. It's the best way, surely. Right, so activate means we can activate pool spawn. Okay, I think we've done everything there except for populate the activation object. We've got to make sure, if we now go back to our make snake button, that should change to activation object, and we can grab our egg and place him in there. Okay, so now our script has the egg there, so that in our activation, we'll get hold of the activation object, get the component which is called spawn, and then run this, or call this function, call this method. Okay, so everything's in place. Let's go and see if we do that. Remember, in our update loop on the make snake button control script, we were checking whether the left mouse key or mouse button 0 was pressed. So our button is white. If we get close enough, it goes green. If we walk away, he goes white. So if I press the left button now, I'm just making waypoints, which is to do with something else. So no snakes emerging. If he's green, if I press the right mouse button, nothing should happen. That's just an incidental snake. Right, if I go out, in, yep, right, okay, here we go. Final test. If I press left, yes, brilliant. We get the snakes. The snakes are released. Release the snakes. Release the snakes. They're gone. Okay, so there we go. This is the tutorial finished. If you have any questions about this, about anything related to like colliders, triggers, and scripts talking to one another, put them down in the comments, and I or some other person will try to answer your question. Right. Thank you very much. Thanks again for watching. See you next time. Goodbye, snakes.